Oh boy, Monster Hunter Wilds is looking good. And I can tell that from the one single trailer that we've gotten with barely any gameplay, because I'm a certified game analyst with a massive audience clamoring for my thoughts. Capcom is in a fantastic position to learn from their past 3 titles, to merge old and new Monster Hunter, to further evolve the series, and bring something really special to the table. I'm Ouroboros. Let's talk. Let's start off with a pretty safe wish. I really hope we get a new weapon type in Wilds. Capcom usually introduces a new weapon each generation, but decided to skip over it for the 5th generation. So we haven't seen anything new added in the main series since Monster Hunter 4, way back in 2013. I think it's a shoo-in for the free space in the Wilds bingo card at this point, but I'm going one step further and wish for a ranged weapon that doesn't suck. I love so many of the melee weapons and hate the ranged ones. I can tolerate bow, but they're so simple compared to even the simple melee weapons. It mostly comes down to the lack of combos. They really just shoot. Yeah, you've got some other attacks like Wyvern Heart and Dragon Piercer, but for the most part, they're just kinda boring. I can appreciate the prep that goes into customizing them pre-hunt, and I like that they have different levels of complexity through coatings and ammo types, but the primary gameplay, hunting, is just so much more boring. I know that Frontier had some crazy weapons, but I don't really consider that to be mainline Monster Hunter. I'd love to have the option to use a ranged weapon with the complexity and combos of Chargeblade, or the fluidity of Longsword. And they don't even have to give up the customization for it. It'd be great to have the best of both worlds. It'd be so much fun to get into ranged weapons, but I'm so turned off by them because of their simplicity. I'd also like to see the moveset customization of Rise and GU make a return. I think this probably won't happen. The experimental stuff usually isn't in the first entry in a generation, so I'm not really holding my breath here. But the styles in GU and switch skills in Rise are so much fun. They add so much depth and creativity to every weapon. There's tons of room for experimentation, and the switch skill swap allows you to make choices on the fly without having to go back to camp. You can adjust your playstyle mid-hunt. I feel like all of the choices come down to personal preference. I love the Spirit Reckoning combo over the Round Slash because of its damage, and that it doesn't auto-sheath your sword. Plus, Valor mode. I also really liked the arts and Silkbind attacks from GU and Rise. I prefer the system in GU because you're free to choose whichever ones you want, rather than being forced to pick between 2 options. And I think that being forced to attack the monster in order to charge up your arts is a better system. It forces you to be aggressive, which has always been my favorite way of hunting. I love fights like Nergigante, Zinogre, and Alatreon, and these arts bring that intensity to every single fight. I do wish that the arts would be less counter-focused. Rise really made a push to put a counter on every single weapon, and I'm not the biggest fan of this. I think it's kind of a nerf to shields. I mean, seriously, how often do you see a Lance in multiplayer anymore? And I love playing Lance, but at this point, every other weapon has a counter, and Longsword has better defensive capabilities than the Lance, which is just a travesty. I don't even think Longsword was awful all at once. It started with Foresight Slash, then EI Slash got added, which felt fine in World since it didn't raise your spirit level and would consume 1 if you missed, but then they changed it in Rise to where there's no penalty, it raises your level if you land it, and the counter window was made way more lenient. Then you throw on top the buffs that it got with Quick Sheath, and it went from strong to absurdly overtuned within the span of like 2 games. I think reverting EI Slash back to its Iceborne version would be good, as well as making Quick Sheath not change the animation. That would help bring Longsword more in line. Longsword is really the only weapon that I'd like to see nerfed. Everything else feels more or less fine. I don't really have an opinion on the Hunting Horn changes. I've never played it, and I know the community is pretty mixed on the changes that Rise made, but I can't really give an informed opinion on it. I would like to have the mobility more in line with World. I think, as of now, it's the best of what we've gotten. It doesn't have some of the weird jank that the older games have, and as much as I liked Capcom experimenting with the verticality in Rise, it really messed with some of the hitboxes. I know that Monster Hunter has always had some questionable hitboxes, but the devs wanted to give old monsters a way to counter the wire bugs. So instead of just giving them new attacks, they made a bunch of the old ones reach into the sky, which just seems kinda lazy. I can't tell you how many times I've gotten hit by a grounded attack when I'm 30 feet in the air. It also creates a disconnect between the old and new monsters. Newer ones will be able to utilize the new aerial space, whereas older ones remain more grounded. This is why I think some of the newer monsters, like Narwa and Ibushi, won't ever be brought over to new titles. It's the same reason we haven't seen any of the underwater monsters make a return. Sticking to the more grounded format, we'll be able to keep and reuse monsters in later installments. I'd also like to see a few changes to the world. I'd love to see a more natural change between the different ecological zones, similar to the Guiding Lands. I think that was Capcom's first go at an open world, and judging by the trailer, that's the direction I think they're going with Wilds. If they go in this direction, I'd love to see them expand on the tracking and scout flies from World. It was really cool at first, but eventually just devolved into finding a single track and following the pretty lights. I think if the monsters left larger traces of where they've been, it would really help. Of course, it could even change based on the monster. Nergigante could leave Elder Dragon remains, and maybe even Chameleos would be really difficult to track. I don't know the best way to go about this, but I'm sure Capcom could come up with some really creative ideas. However, if they don't decide to go deeper into tracking, I like the system that they used in Rise. Honestly, running around the map and looking for a monster isn't fun, and it gets in the way of the best part, which is hunting. I know some people didn't like it, but I thought it was a good example of streamlining the game's mechanics because it trims the fat. Regardless of which direction they go, I hope they can continue to develop a living, breathing ecosystem like World. The areas, turf wars, and interactions large monsters have with the smaller ones are just incredible, and they're completely in line with the overarching nature theming of the series. Hunters aren't doing this for sport. We only hunt when monsters are causing a disturbance or are a big enough threat to the ecosystem. So I can't wait to see the next evolution in this area. World was really the first game that I've ever seen put such a big emphasis on wildlife interactions, and I hope that the series leans more into that. I had mentioned the Guiding Lands, and I enjoy the area, but wish they would rework it a bit. It's fun to just chill and hunt with people, but I wish there were easier ways to lure out monsters you were grinding. I don't know why the quest leader is the only one who can do this, and it artificially inflates the time it takes to grind for materials. It's a really cool concept, but just needs to be refined a bit. Honestly, as long as the endgame is focused on RNG material drops and not RNG equipment drops, then I'm sure Capcom is going to make something engaging. And that brings me to my last little section here, the hunts. I really wish that Capcom does away with the sieges. I hate these quests. They feel just so contradictory to the rest of the game. I think that Kulve and Safi are really cool monsters on their own, but their hunts just drive me crazy. I don't like having to hunt the same monster 2, 3, 4 times just to get some drops. And I don't like that they drop RNG equipment. I think that Safi was done better than Kulve, but as mostly a solo player, I hate having to join 15 other people to effectively farm a hunt. It would be better if the Safi set and weapons weren't insanely powerful because I wouldn't feel obligated to farm it. The Safi equipment is just so unbelievably powerful that it almost trivialized every other set until Fatalis dropped. I'm not a fan of this. I don't mind the very last monster having some crazy equipment. At that point, there's nothing really left for you to do, but Safi was just way too excessive. I think that's kind of a skill and mechanical issue. With the rework of skills in World, certain pieces are just flat out better than others. Where in the past you could make a bunch of things work, especially because you were trying to avoid negative skills. I don't know the fix for this, and honestly, I don't know if there is one. I'd also like to see follower quests come back. I think it's great for people who don't have a stable internet connection, and they breathe more life into the characters of the world. The Alatreon hunt in World was controversial, to say the least. It more or less came down to the brutally strict mechanics, but I've always really enjoyed the hunt. There's a lot more going on than your typical hunt, and I think that change of pace was great for an endgame monster. And the gear even made for a unique playstyle. I'd like to see maybe 1 or 2 endgame hunts like this. They could even wait for the Master Rank expansion to bring them in, but they really made for a unique and very high-stakes fight. Something that Rise did really well was actually having monsters that weren't just lizards or dragons. There's so many amazing monster types, and World used the most generic ones. I'd love to see more creative monsters return. Malfestio, Zamtrios, Najarala, Celtis Queen, even Tetsukabra. Come on, Capcom, you blue-balled us with the cute little baby Tetsu and Rise, you gotta give us the big boy. Regardless of what Capcom decides to do, I know that Wilds is gonna be a fun game, but we have so much content to pull from. I think that they have an incredible opportunity to take the best from the old and the new. GU, World, and Rise are all fundamentally the same game, but radically different mechanically. I really hope they can pull from the best and trim away the worst. This is the final part of my Monster Hunter May, so feel free to check out the other 3 videos if I haven't bored you more than the Xeno'jiiva fight. Anyway, 2025 can't come soon enough, and I'm just as excited as all of you to experience the thrill of the hunt once again. Thanks for watching.